Beware of the cars. They are coming to life. If you live somewhere near Northern Virginia right now, then I demand that you read this before it's too late. I'm not sure if anyone reading this has been aware of some of the things happening within this area. But if you are, then chances are that you're probably just as scared right now as I am. For those who aren't, however, let me start from the beginning. My hometown of Rosetta Heights, VA, is a fairly normal-sized, but pretty clean town between Gordonsville and Culpeper. And I've been living here ever since I was 5, which is approximately 27 years ago. I remember when my brother Joshua and I would tinker around with old electronic devices when we were teenagers. We would take old radios and TVs from the scrapyard. Then we would sit in the yard, disassemble the gadgets, do research on them, etc. 16 years later, and I now work as a professional auto mechanic around the outskirts of the town. Or at least I used to work as one. I'm honestly not sure if I will ever again. It all started 2 weeks ago. I got ready at home and headed to the garage as usual. I think the best way I can describe myself in the world is as a spectator of society. I've always been perfectly happy watching society and knowing that there are normal, empathetic humans around me. I think that's the reason why I never got married or even had children yet. Nonetheless, life was good for me 2 weeks ago. On a Thursday morning, November 11th, we had a person roll into the garage with a 1979 Camaro Z divided by 28. This person, who we'll call Ashton, was possibly the most notorious man in Rosetta Heights. He used to be a massive troublemaker in his teenage years, and then made a living in the street scene where he made a lot of money, half of which he used to modify the shit out of classic muscle cars, a lot of which he still surprisingly owns to this day. When he turned in the Camaro, he explained that a lot of the amenities strangely weren't working at all, and that the reason he couldn't fix them himself was that he was leaving tomorrow to spend a week with his family. We were gladly willing to work on one of his cars while he was away. However, as we were working on his car, very strange things were going on with it. First of all, we somehow couldn't get the dashboard even the slightest bit loose. No matter what tools we used, it wouldn't even budge. But then it got even weirder. We swore we could have heard some sort of weird air circulation coming from the inside, even though the car wasn't even on. We opened the hood, but we didn't really see anything. So we raised the car up to look under it, and what we saw was the most confusing thing. Small areas of the car were actually turning pink. We found multiple areas on the underside of the car that was somehow turning an organic pink color. However, the worst part of it was that when we touched it, it was disgustingly squishy. We actually decided to close the garage earlier that day, because when we had multiple people come and having the exact issues with their cars and found out the exact same thing was happening to every single one of them, we decided we had seen enough. The situation got much worse over the next several days. More and more people were turning their cars in for us to fix, even though we had no idea how to fix them. Our entire outside lot was eventually filled with people's cars which just sat there unable to be fixed. Don't get me wrong, there were multiple garages both in and outside of town. But it got to a point where even the largest garages were becoming too full to let in more cars. As for the earlier cars, we found ourselves horrified at what was happening to them. First, we weren't able to open the hood, trunk, or even any door at all. Then the body panels began to warp and bend over time. I could hardly believe what I was seeing. The warping of the cars caused the glass to crack and shatter open, and then eventually it even caused small pieces of the cars to fall off. It wasn't until Ashton finally came back that things truly started descending into chaos, since people were unable to fix their cars by themselves. They were forced to drive their cars as everything mentioned above started happening to them. I ended up witnessing dozens of people driving through town and even brand new cars that were warping and breaking. I saw the engine of multiple cars catch on fire as they were driving. I even saw the wheel of one person's car fall off as they were accelerating from a stoplight. When Ashton arrived at our garage, he was obviously very confused about what was happening, in which we did the best we could to explain everything. Then he requested to see his car. We actually closed the garage for a few days and forgot to check on the cars inside. I will never forget the intense feeling of dread before opening the garage for the first time in 4 days. The Camaro ... oh god ... it was such a horrific sight. The entire car was melting in unnatural ways. Every little space in the cabin had been filled with this pulsating organic matter that was revealed even more by the driver's side door that had completely fallen off. The Camaro wasn't even the worst car though. The worst one was, or what was left of, a 1990 VW Fox that we had forgotten to take down from the lift. Several large pieces of the car had piled up on the floor. Almost all of the body panels were melting and falling off the sides. A large hole had formed at the bottom of the car in between the lift. And the most disgusting sack of flesh dangled 5 feet down from it. The entire garage had a foul smell of exposed flesh. And there was even an awful red haze that filled the place. It didn't take long for us to immediately leave the garage. We shut the large metal door. And I don't think we ever opened it again. By the time it was the 21st, there weren't a lot of cars left on the streets. All of a sudden, everyone was afraid of driving. By this point, even the school buses and other community service vehicles were put out of service from experiencing the same mechanical malfunctions. One poor lady had to be rescued from her Porsche because the doors were stuck and the windows were closed. However, even some of the police cars, fire trucks, and ambulances were beginning to decay. When people saw what was happening to the cars in their later stages of development, they began to panic. No one knew what to do. Some people reported to the police station about what they saw. Others tried taking pictures of the melting organic cars to social media, unknowing of the consequences of doing so. Some people even tried protesting at the town hall for the mayor to do something. The situation even went viral on social media and was picked up by the news network shortly after. The mayor tried to fix the situation by making everyone stay in their homes until the situation was resolved. However, not everyone listened. I don't know how, but I was one of the last people in town that still had a fully working car. A 1997 Toyota Hilux to be exact. I remember the last time that I tried driving through town casually. There were almost no cars at all outside, nor were there any people. The entire place seemed like a ghost town. The only thing that convinced me otherwise was driving past the town hall, which had its fair amount of protesters. I turned onto James Vincent, which was where the local gas station was. But then I stopped at the sight of people crowding around a parked car. Well, I say car. But what I mean is a pile of organic matter that was surrounded by the corpse of what was once a car. I saw people taking gasoline canisters from the gas station over to the car. And I realized that they were actually going to burn it. When it seemed like they were done pouring gasoline all over the car. It looked like they were getting ready to ignite it, but then they all noticed me watching them. From inside one of the only normal and working cars in the entire town. As soon as they all saw me, I instantly had the instinct to get out of there as fast as I could. I slammed into reverse and turned around onto the other street. As soon as I started shifting to first, I looked to my left and saw the entire crowd of people running towards me. I yelped at the sight, but I was able to escape before they could reach me. The day afterward didn't feel much better. I didn't want to go back to town that day. I was afraid that everyone was now searching for me considering the events that happened that previous day. Little did I know that I had yet to experience the true nightmare that was about to unfold. Because on the night of November 23rd, the cars came to life. It was 11:30 p.m. I was having trouble sleeping that night. I don't know who wouldn't if they realized that they were somehow wanted by the people of your own town. Even if realistically they would have just stolen my truck from me. Eventually, though, I decided that I was too anxious to fall asleep and I had to know where my brother was. For the past 10 years, my brother Joshua lived in a large apartment somewhere around the center of town. He works as a lead technician for a lighting company and makes a decent amount of money doing it. Obviously far more successful than me. I called him on my phone hoping that he would answer. I waited for about 9 or 10 seconds before a wave of relief flowed over me when Joshua finally picked up the phone. I explained to him that I was feeling anxious at my hometown and I wanted to meet with him in person to hopefully have a nice time. I've always appreciated the fact that Joshua has always been very nice to me. And he gave me good news. He would be arriving at Rosetta in 10 minutes. Feeling relieved, I got into my Hilux and drove over to town hall. As soon as I parked next to the street and got out of the truck, I immediately saw my brother's brand new Infiniti sedan drive down the street and park behind my truck. We hugged each other and engaged in a conversation about everything that's been happening, but not before staring at the protest in the town hall. The protest had gotten pretty bad at this point. There weren't any police cars to properly maintain the massive crowd of people. Several mutated cars had been carried into the town hall and set ablaze. I saw Joshua look at more mutated cars being towed into the area by protesters. You know, I've seen a lot of stuff about this town on the media, but I've never seen that before. What the hell happened to those cars? I thought they just broke down or something. My brother said, unknowing of the horrors that had happened here over the past 2 weeks. At first, I was skeptical of telling him about everything. How would he react? How many questions would he have? Would he believe me? What if I don't know enough to tell him? But eventually, I came to the reality that he is my brother, and I have trust in him that he will listen to me and believe me. So there we were, walking down the street to the local bar and hangout. I was doing my best to explain everything that had happened here and what was happening to the cars. That's when we stopped in our places. We heard something ... from the town hall. It was a muffled roar, followed by the intense sounds of people screaming and panicking. We looked at each other with an intense feeling of dread, and we knew something bad had just happened. We dashed back to our cars where we could see the town hall, preparing to see the worst, but what we saw was worse than we could possibly imagine. A mutated car, which was still sitting on a large carrier truck, had grown humongous tentacle-like legs covered in deep red blood and was standing up over the crowd. Then the front bumper fell off, revealing a horrendous insect-like mouth with tendrils hanging from it. The original body of the car had morphed and spread out over the flesh of the body, giving the monster a shell that had somewhat similar proportions to the original car but looked nothing like it at the same time. The only things that didn't fall off were the headlights, which were as if the creature was using them as eyes. We could only stare at the monster in shock and horror as it towered over the people. All of a sudden, the car had evolved from a heaping mess of flesh and metal into an eldritch monstrosity in the blink of an eye. Hundreds of people pushed past us, jumped over our cars, not even paying attention to them, and did nothing but run for their lives. It stared at all of the tiny human beings with two bright yellowish lights, as if deciding which to eat first. Then it casted its headlights on us. It knew who its first targets were now, and as soon as it did, Joshua dashed to the nearest building, kicking the door open so hard that it almost broke. Since I was following close behind, I could hear the monster lunging towards us with the most fight or flight-inducing roar you could possibly imagine. I didn't have time to close the door of the building before it could come to us, so my brother and I ran as far back in the building as we could. The monster jumped in front of the building entrance, crushing a section of my truck bed and smashing the headlight of Joshua's Infiniti. It attempted to stretch its horrible-looking tendrils into the building at us, but they weren't long enough. Eventually, the monster gave up and ran down the street to look for more people. We checked carefully outside the building to see if the creature was really gone. And just as we were walking out, we heard the town's sirens go off. This had to be a move by the mayor to alert the citizens to some extent that they're in great danger. There probably might have also been an ease broadcast for the town too, but I'm not sure. All we knew is that we had to get out of there fast. We decided to take the Infiniti sedan, as we thought it might have been a better getaway vehicle, and we weren't really traveling on rough roads anyways. We were right about choosing the Infiniti. The car was damn quick, and it was even really good at cornering too. We genuinely thought we would make it out of town without any trouble. We pulled up to a T intersection that people like to refer to as Bird Eyes intersection. It got its name because it had a really good view of the northwestern part of town. What we saw from that intersection will forever traumatize me. There were several car monsters that had already woken up, and I saw them literally destroying the buildings trying to find people. The most horrifying one we saw though was this school bus monster that towered over everything. As the school bus monster slowly walked through the city, crushing some of the buildings as it did, Its tendrils were picking up people and eating them alive. I then found myself frantically trying to use my phone to pull up Google Maps so that we could find the quickest way out of here. I managed to make a route and instructed Joshua which streets to go down. We were making good progress while also trying to ignore the horrific sounds of car monsters wrecking everything they see and possibly eating people. But then out of nowhere, another car monster, which was noticeably smaller than the others, jumped down from a building and right in front of us. It turns out it was using the shell of what was once a tiny Ford Festiva, which was probably why it was so small. But it was much quicker than us than the others. As soon as we turned down the street on the right to avoid it, it was quickly able to smash our car to the side and onto its roof. It then attempted to roll our car over. As it was doing so though, I swear I remember hearing the sound of a loud car engine as I was panicking out of my mind. Soon it managed to roll our car over, and was about ready to grab Joshua out of the car. That was until we heard a loud shotgun blast, and saw the creature instantly fall over to the side. Finally, we noticed a dirty, white, 1969 Camaro SS in front of us. The car was normal, and the person driving stepped out, revealing that he was Ashton. He yelled at us to get out of our car and into his Camaro. We had so many questions to ask him, but Ashton, like a casual badass, couldn't explain everything to us at that time. But one thing he did explain was that it turns out the monsters were actually extremely fragile. It seemed at first like they would be almost impossible to kill with their shells of the cars. However, even a small pistol could easily severely damage the monsters. We found ourselves racing through the town with multiple car monsters sneaking up on us. Joshua had the privilege of using the shotgun to kill the monsters that were chasing us. That was until one more car monster jumped out in front of us. Ashton screeched to a stop, and we unbelievably found ourselves face to face with Ashton's 1979 Camaro Z divided by 28. Ashton reversed away from the Camaro as it crawled towards us, just before we braced ourselves for it to attack, and Joshua was preparing to fire the shotgun at it. A bright beam of light shined on the monster. We looked up and found out it was an Apache helicopter, which soon rained bullets onto the monster in front of us. For us, this could only mean that the military arrived at Rosetta Heights just in time. As we raced out of town, we could actually see multiple military vehicles pressing into town to fight the monsters. We all of a sudden found ourselves in the middle of a battlefield. We figured that we couldn't go onto the highway because obviously it would have been blocked by the military. So instead we attempted to find a smaller road out of Rosetta. After what felt like an eternity of turning down different streets, and somehow not being spotted by the military, we eventually found a small road leading out of town. Afterward, we eventually found a distant gas station. And then we found a motel that Ashton paid for us to stay at. We've been here for 4 days now, and have been watching the news network about Rosetta Heights being blocked off after a classified incident took place there. I know this might sound crazy at first, but I think an organism is infecting our cars and spreading like a plague. First of all, I noticed a pattern that dirty and rusty cars seem to have a much smaller chance of turning into a creature than cleaner cars. This would explain why my truck, which is considered both rusty and dirty, was never infected during the entire time those events played out, and why Ashton's white Camaro also didn't seem to be infected, as it was extremely dirty. The second is that I remember seeing community buses and trolleys are also showing signs of being infected by this organism. This leads me to a terrifying theory that the buses are heading to other towns and cities, and infecting cars in Culpeper, Front Royal, Charlottesville, and Manassas. I genuinely wish that what I was saying was crazy, but I've been watching news reports today of cars suddenly breaking down in the mentioned areas. I don't want to say what might happen in the future. All I know is that you listen to my warning. If the amenities in your car suddenly stop working one day, get rid of the damn car.